This is the Almost Awakened Podcast, a no-nonsense approach to spirituality with your hosts, Brittany Hartley and Bill Reel. Here we dive deep into the wisdom traditions while acknowledging insightful breakthroughs in science, psychology, and human development. Our goal is to explore the good life and the very best of spirituality. No nonsense required. Check us out at almostawakened.org, where you can check out past episodes, make a donation, email us a question or comment, or find out more about the resources we shared. And now, today's podcast episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Almost Awakened podcast. Mike, how are you doing today?
Excellent.
Good. Hey, so the reason you and I are having a conversation is that we've been talking about you having left a high demand fundamentalist religion and having done that at an older age, and some of the wrestle that comes with that. I have lots of friends in various age groups, and the friends that are older, it is a little more difficult, if I can just say that. Like, it is. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of the challenges that come with deconstructing religion generally, and then doing it at a little bit older age. I just think that's pretty brave and courageous, because most folks, I think, make some sort of determination kind of later on that they see that risk, and some folks are just more prone to kind of just stay with it and pretend, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So before we get into kind of a big conversation about all of this, maybe introduce yourself to the audience and share whatever pieces and parts of yourself that you'd like to.
Well, my wife and I, as you said, Bill, have just made the decision to step back from the church, and it has been a struggle. It's been a difficult thing. My wife and I both grew up in Southeast Idaho. We've been married for almost 44 years. We have 4 children. And having children and raising them in such a high demand religion is one of the things, I think, Bill, that makes it really difficult for some people to leave, especially when those children and their grandchildren are still active in the church.
Right, they're believers.
They're believers, and
Right.
and I know I've been communicating with a lot of people my age that literally lost access to their grandchildren because they've made the decision to leave. So you're right. There's a lot of factors for us older folks, the seniors, when it comes to leaving these high demand religions. But we've been active for a long time, and we live in Colorado, and leaving for us was, I think, a lot easier than it is for a lot of other folks, because for one thing, all our kids left. They never believed. All 4 of our children left, and they've never put a lot of pressure on us. We've put a lot of pressure on them, and that's another one of the things that we're trying to sort through, is the way we judged and treated and the way the church programmed us to judge our kids. When they started to do things that they shouldn't have done, we didn't behave very well. And those are some of the things that we've got to deconstruct. But anyway, Sandy and I, we've been married a long time, and we were pretty well. We were as TBM as you can get, and things just started to happen. Things just, it's a whole long story on how I finally got out. But yeah.
How long ago was it?
2 years, Bill.
2 years ago, you went from believing in your faith system to realizing something doesn't add up and
correct,
taking it apart.
There were a lot of things. Yeah, there was a lot of things that led up to it, but it was mainly, there's a particular document out there that my daughter challenged me to read, and I literally went from a believing member to being fully out in about 4 hours, having read that document.
Yeah,
So,
after having spent a lifetime
correct,
believing in and serving in that system.
correct. It took me, literally took me 4 hours to get out.
I hear a lot of folks who it happens that quick, and I'm kind of the opposite side of that, where it took me a decade of just kind of a slow burn of wanting it to be so true, and little pieces and parts telling me it wasn't, and me just making excuses. And
exactly,
again, for those who do it really quick, I think there's pros and cons. For those who do it really slow, I think there's pros and cons. And
right.
Yeah. Let's jump into this a little bit. There's a list of things that you made, of things that had to be thought out and processed and kind of rebuilt. And as I read your list, kind of prepping for this morning's conversation, those stand out to me as things I had to do too. And so I think it'll be interesting to jump into these. But the first one is the idea of political views, and maybe run us through where you were politically, like what you felt like the system encouraged you to be, and then where, what your politics and political views had to do between, when you were in that system believing and to today, and maybe tell us kind of what that process looked like.
Well, as a teenager and a young adult, when my wife and I, when we first got married, back in 70, 79, 78, we always voted Democrat. We thought we were Democrats. We weren't very political at the time, but as we grew older, and of course got more ingrained in the doctrine and the views of the church and some of the directions that some of the beliefs that they held, we started to drift more to the conservative side, and became, and it's funny, Bill, because since leaving and trying to get a different perspective, I'm still really struggling. I get onto some of the forums that some of the prior members, get the Facebook forums and Reddit, the subreddits, and it seems to me like everybody that leaves these high demand religions like ours, just and they're ultra conservative, like I was, they completely go to the other side in almost everything that they believe. They take on a more leftist view of the world, and I'm struggling with that. There are many things that I've tried to deconstruct and look at differently once you leave that religious environment, but I'm still struggling with that, trying to find out where I'm at. But when we left, yes, we're ultra conservative in all our beliefs, and as far as I was concerned, all the arguments that the left made about whatever issue you want to take, we just wouldn't listen to it. It just didn't make any sense to us, and so that's been a kind of a struggle for us.
Yeah, the religious system that you and I were both in, and as you point out, like all of these high demand fundamentalist religions do this, but they operate from a very conservative center.
Correct.
And so our system, and I think most of them do this because there's some legality to not being involved in pushing a particular party or candidate. So these systems tend to say that they are neutral. And
correct.
There seems to be some, you seem to be kind of aware with like nod, wink, wink. We're really conservative here. But, you can be a member of either party if you want to be, right?
Correct.
And you can lean either way, terms of party, but then there are these issues that absolutely push you over to the conservative side. And it is interesting because when I was a believing member of my faith system, I'd grown up not a member of anything, and my parents were pretty politically neutral. Like you could just tell from the conversations that there were people in their family that were on both sides, and that both sides could argue with each other and hold their position. And when I joined this religious system as a teenager, I very quickly realized that the one and true political system to be part of was the conservative side, a Republican here in the United States,
Correct.
for instance. And we would debate these things. I would watch Rush Limbaugh. I would watch Glenn Beck. I was really interested in that side, and I just automatically knew they were right. And it really kind of comes from this black and white perspective where the system says, this is what it says about birth control, and this is what it says about abortion, and this is what it says about gay marriage, and this is what it says about equality in terms of women, because the man's in charge of the home and the man presides. And so we kind of think it's healthy because we're swimming in it, right? It's like the fish in the fish tank. You don't know any better. But you're it's ingrained in you to be this conservative on all of these issues. And as you point out, when you start to let go of religion, you start to deconstruct it, you start to challenge the ideas it presents, you have to reconsider things like birth control, abortion, gay marriage,
all of it,
patriarchy, sexism, right? And those things, once you realize your system is wrong, you open up the door to going like, well, maybe they've been wrong on a lot of things, and maybe the other side of the aisle has some merit.
Exactly. And religion, especially ours, I think, and some others, it conditions you to see the world the way they want you to see it, just like you said. And I was all in. I did the same thing. I every day I would listen to Glenn Beck, and then I would listen to Rush Limbaugh, and then I would listen to Sean Hannity, and it was just on and on and on. And we were always right, and they were always wrong. And once I stepped away, and I think back, Bill, at how my thoughts and actions and beliefs shaped my views and my thoughts and the way that I thought of other people, especially the LGBTQ, and all of it, the abortion, and I'm almost ashamed, but I got to keep telling myself it's not my fault. It's not our fault.
It's not.
And we were born into this. We were programmed. We were indoctrinated, and I'm working very hard to really look at issues from, I can't just run to the other side on everything. I just can't accept everything. And you know what? I still think both sides have merit but you got to find that sweet spot, and that's what I'm trying to do is it's even funny how in the last couple of weeks, that new the James Webb Telescope has been showing, and things as simple as, and this may be kind of corny, but before we left, the thought of any extraterrestrial beings, was just something that could not be possible.
Right. Our theology made it so that wasn't really something you had to worry about.
Didn't have to worry about it. All this stuff, the Navy saying, yeah, we got all these UFOs, that's got to be explained some other way. And now that you get out, and again, this is kind of might be a little corny, but I look at those new photographs, and obviously we can't be alone. So
Yeah.
uh, everything, once you get outside that box, things really change and open up for you.
Yeah, and you hit on it, which I also have moved considerably away from this extremely conservative position I used to hold. And today I would call myself a moderate. And on some issues, I tend to go much more left. And usually those are social issues where
Sure,
um,
sure,
I realize, like, hey, every human being is having this human experience. It is damn difficult. And some folks start off with less privilege. Some folks have disadvantages for various reasons. And in a past, in that past life of belief, I would have, as you said earlier, judged them as having just sinned and gone astray and made bad
correct.
choices. And today I go like, no, that person probably is me, just under a different set of circumstances, a different set of
Yeah,
parents. And
exactly.
yeah, and so you kind of sense that everybody came to their moment honestly, and that we ought to do all we can to reduce everyone's trauma. And maybe those of us in privilege, maybe we can endure a little more so that someone else can have an opportunity or feel safe, or be able to
Hmm.
process some of the harm that's come to them and maybe have less harm in the future, right?
Correct, correct.
And
Yeah,
then maybe, maybe on other issues we still stay more conservative,
correct.
financial ones and whatnot. And maybe sometimes it's not black or white on any of these, and maybe the ones that seem like they're innocuous and we can still be conservative, maybe they tie into somewhere down the line, folks and how they're affected, and maybe vice versa. And so, as you point out, these issues become not simple. Birth control or abortion or gay rights,
Immigration.
they're
Yeah,
not as simple as the view that people gave us 20 years ago.
correct, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk for a moment about, let's take a few of these. Let's talk for a moment about, like, birth control.
Okay.
Um, Conservative religions are going to want to have a high number of birth inside that system. It becomes very normal for conservative religions to value each human being who's born, if for
Right.
no other reason than it adds another member to the roles of that system, right?
Correct.
And so um, we were always kind of taught that folks, like, some people make bad choices. There's consequences for choices. If somebody gets pregnant, they absolutely should not take a life. And the only option they have is to give birth. And if they don't want the child, fine, give it for adoption, but
Right.
have the child. And we, on that side of the belief, just knew that that was the right way to see things. How, for instance, on this particular issue, have your views changed over the last couple of years?
Well, obviously they have changed, and of course, just recently, of course, with the Supreme Court ruling, and I was absolutely in that box, Bill. I just, there's no way anybody should be allowed to have an abortion, and unless, of course, there's some extreme circumstances, the mother's in danger, but I was in that box. Just have the child and adopt it out if you don't want the child, and uh, but recently, and try to take each one of these issues and do as much research and try to get as informed as I possibly can. And I've just basically come down to, I do believe now that a woman should have the right to make that choice. I think she should. Um, However, I still believe that that's a child. I mean, I would prefer it didn't happen. I'm kind of somewhere in between there. Um, I think if it can't be an easy choice for anybody. It just simply can't. And but sometimes that choice has to be made. Um, And I still believe that's a life that's being terminated, and it has to be taken extremely seriously. But I believe a woman should have the choice to do that, and without, yeah. So
Yeah.
I've
So
changed on that a bit.
yeah, I mean, who's in a better position to make that decision than the person who's being affected by it directly in the right?
Correct.
So, and as
Correct.
you point out, like, I don't think those decisions are taken lightly. Let me say it this way too. When I deconstructed my religious system and just did what you just did, which is go back into the issue and really dive deep into it, I read several sites where they tried to present both sides of the argument fairly.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was if you took God out of the equation, the pro-choice side had a ton more merit than I gave it credit for. And
Exactly.
when I looked at the argument, it wasn't just, I'm reading a book right now, a book that was famous a decade or so ago, Freakonomics. But the book goes into various hot button issues, and it shows you how an understanding of economics can help you have a new perspective. And what they were showing was birth control is one of the issues they were tackling. And they talked about how when women have access to make that choice, the crime rate is significantly lower, because when a woman is forced to give birth to a child, generally, and she doesn't want to have it or thinks it's best not to, generally she's right. Like, the situation is going to be pretty dire for that kid to grow up in. And in some ways, like, everybody thinks adoption solves the problem, but in a lot of ways it doesn't.
No.
It's a broken system as well. And the economic hardship on the community, like tax dollars that go in, that becomes more heavy in areas where abortion is not a choice that a woman can make. And the financial repercussions to the woman, the health issues to the woman, the lack of mobility or access she has to education or as equal employment that her counterpart who had that choice in some other place would have. All of those things are not in her favor if forced to have that child. And so we think it's just a simple issue, but it affects crime, it affects poverty, it affects access to healthcare, it affects access to good employment. It's all the things. And so when you sit down with an issue post deconstruction, you really have to sit with, how do these things really affect all of us, affect the person, most importantly, the person directly involved? And is it really the best decision to force people in dire situations to raise a child that they don't think they can provide an adequate home for?
Correct.
And suddenly, you and I are sitting with these and reading them and going like, whoa, I'd never thought about it from that side. There's real merit to the other side of the aisle.
Well, and it's not just that, Bill. It's all that. And when you look at an issue, and you said earlier, you kind of nailed it. When you take God out of the equation, it allows you to start looking at that one particular issue with a whole different perspective. Because we were taught, of course, that you've got all these spirit children up here, right? And they're just waiting for that body, right? And we just took that opportunity away with that, So once you take God out of it, and of course that's another whole nother issue. I don't know what to do about God anymore. After coming out of this 65 years of I'm not sure where to go with that. I've started to get to a point where I'm now more apt to believe that there isn't one than there is one. right?
Yeah.
So that's been really difficult. But all these issues, Bill, once you take God out of it, and it just changes your entire perspective on how you look at these issues. And when you start looking, like you said, at the economic and the hardships, and and you just start putting some of these children into that foster care system, and
Yeah.
the whole thing, it's just not it's not black and white. It's not black and white.
No. Again, that book Freakonomics was explaining that you can make a direct correlation to the kids that, in areas where the choice is not available, there is a direct correlation to those children born to homes that, again, out of every 100, 40 of them would have chosen to make a different choice. They could directly correlate that to the crime rate being risen in those areas. And because those kids are born into impoverished situations, and situations that have extra trauma being added to that child's life, and hence the chance of those children turning out to be criminals was significantly higher.
Correct.
And so then you look at, like, how does that affect the next person? Like, the homicide rate was significantly higher. So now you have other people down the line whose life is taken because we didn't allow that woman to make a choice about that child, or that fetus at that time. And so gets into kind of this next question, which is this idea of wrestling with conservative values. Maybe we've already said it, but there seems to be so many things that we aligned ourselves with on the front half of life, that on the back end of life here, when we talk about conservative values or changing values, I just became a whole lot more inclusive. Like I was at an event. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago with some friends, and there was a person there who was a male who wore a dress. And in a past life, I would have sat there, 20 years ago, I would have sat there and had so much judgment, right?
Oh, yes.
And so many stories and so many thoughts running through my head about how that person was doing something bad. And the reality was, as I sat there that night a couple weeks ago, I just thought to myself, like, here's this human being whose thoughts and processes in their head is completely different than mine.
Right.
And we created a world that said, here's the acceptable box everyone has to fit in. And on some piece of us, every one of us falls outside that box.
Correct.
And we kind of hide those parts of ourselves because our system says those things are unacceptable. And here I am sitting at this event and really just appreciating their humanity. Really just find that people now, their diversity is interesting. How they're different than me is really of value. And there's something to learn from everybody. And I really have just grown a ton more inclusive. So I think, I want to see what your thoughts are, but I think this process of our tribe not accepting our new views, and our new views saying that the tribe didn't really get it right, opens us up to seeing where we, because I want to be a good person. I've talked to you enough to know that you want to be a good person. We're trying to figure out, like, how can I make room for me, and how can I make room for every other human to have the best human experience possible without all of us hurting each other.
Exactly. And I had a very similar experience that you just talked about. Excuse me. We went last November there was an event in Salt Lake. That was the Thrive event. In fact, I think you spoke at it. But we were sitting at a table, and we just happened to pick a table. And this was right after we had gotten out, fully. And so we went over to Salt Lake and attended this event. And we were sitting at the table, and there were two gay couples that were sitting at the table with us. And we just had a blast with these people. It was just it was kind of one of those aha moments for me where I, again, once you realize and that uh, their lifestyle is no different than yours. It's just they've just chosen to love somebody else um, of the same gender, and it just again was one of those aha moments. These were genuine, funny, just wonderful people. We had a blast with these people, talking to them, getting to know them, and I look at everybody different now. Once you take God out of it, I don't care if it's a homeless guy in the corner begging. I I I look at him differently now than I did.
Mm.
And you use the word inclusive, and I'm becoming much more inclusive. I don't judge the way I did. Um, everything has changed, and of course I look at things different. I don't believe in sin anymore. I don't. There's no such thing as sin. There's right and there's wrong and there's bad and there's good, and there's consequences for actions. But I don't believe anybody's sinning. I don't think anybody's up there with a book making check marks. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really opened our eyes up to a whole different world and different people and different cultures. Everything is just
Yeah.
uh, we're better people. There's no I'm a better person. There's no question about it. I have become a better person. I've become a better husband. I've become a better father. I'm finally getting to know my kids. You know, uh,
Same, by the way. Yeah.
yeah, I'm finally once you take that elephant out of the room, right? Because gosh, you've raised your kids. They've gone a different direction. They're not living the way, and of course we're taught, Bill, that if they don't get in line, then we're not going to be with them in the next life.
Mm.
You know, uh,
Yeah.
and and so you put so much pressure on your kids. But once we left, and of course they were all just ecstatic. Our daughter, she just said, I've been waiting for this my whole life. So you just become a better person.
Yeah.
There's just no question about it.
Yeah. It seems as though conservative systems spend a lot of time and energy imposing on you that you believe that the ways in which people are different than the small box of ways that are acceptable to show up in the world, that they're bad, right? There's this idea of
Mhm.
sin. And so conservative systems are always creating us's and them's. Us's are those that are in, that believe, that signal to each other that we believe. And anybody who pushes back against the system, anybody who lives their life in a different way, anybody who um, whether it's their morality or whether it's just their life choices, anytime those things are outside of the small box we're given, they're lost, they're fallen. We have all these negative labels for folks, and all conservative religions do that. It seems as though that when I left that behind, like you, I started to have exposure and experience with people who were different than me. And when I listened to their life story and I go like, oh, they really did come to this moment honestly. They weren't, going around and being vile or making unhealthy decisions. They were just trying to be the fullest expression of their humanity.
Absolutely.
And that had them living their life a different way than I did.
Yep.
But I didn't see it as like, oh, like they woke up one morning and decided to, make bad choices. It was that they woke up one morning and weren't going to hide themselves anymore. And
Correct.
they chose to be the real person that they are at the expense of the conservative systems looking down upon them. Um, but the box of behaviors that we were told to be, it was never real that people were choosing to be bad outside of that box anyway. The box wasn't real. It didn't exist.
Exactly. It's a myth, you know.
It's a man-made construct. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is. It is. And um, you know, and you live your whole life in that box, right? And again, it shapes your thoughts, it shapes your views, and yeah, once you you know, and look, uh, we've experienced some of what we're talking about. Once you leave, the people that, you know, we here in Colorado where we live, you know, we still see occasionally go to a restaurant or go to the grocery store, and we see people that that we used to attend church with, and uh, you know, they know we've left the church. You know, uh, 2 years ago, I was in a very high leadership position in our ward here, and so you can feel that vibe. You feel a little bit of that wall and that judgmental view and attitude. You just do. You know, you see it, you feel it. They kind of give you this. You know, oh, it's good to see you, blah blah blah, but and then it's over, it's done. They don't want to have anything to do with you, and so uh, what I'm trying to say is, you know, it gave me that perspective, a little bit of a perspective on how I probably came off to others that were outside when I was in.
You could
You
now see
know,
yourself in a mirror.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
you can see that and feel it, and
Yeah.
it's not good. It's not a good feeling to realize that you judged people and treated people poorly,
And you don't
simply,
even know it.
and you don't even know it.
No.
You don't know it. You don't. It's what you feel is right. These people are you know, they're lost, and unless they believe the way I believe, um, you know, I got no time for them. I
Yeah.
got no time for them.
Yeah, religion teaches you to judge difference as bad, and religion gives you permission to dismiss others'
Correct.
experience and their perspective because they're different. Because you get to automatically decide that they are not one of us, that our job is to bring them to the truth.
Correct.
Then you can dismiss anything someone says. So when someone comes to you, um, gay or black or female, or anything that makes somebody different than the standard person in our system, which the people that are really benefiting from the system are white men, right? And
Hmm.
so anytime white heterosexual cisgender men, and so anytime somebody is something other than that, our system gave us some sort of permission to dismiss them,
Correct.
and to not value their story as equal to ours.
Exactly.
And so you get to this side of life where you've deconstructed it, and suddenly you have a human being sitting across from you whose life experience seems reasonable, and it seems like, oh, I can see why they lived the life that they did, and they didn't go around making choices every single time. Some of these things were ways in which they just came into the world.
Exactly.
And so you're trying to make room for people wherein you didn't make room from before. As you point out, we couldn't even know it. You have this idea that it's your job to share the gospel message with
Right.
everyone. They can benefit from you. You kind of know they can't. You're not exactly going to benefit from them. That right?
They've got nothing for me.
Yeah,
I have everything for them. You
yeah,
know, I've got, if you'll just get in line here, you know,
yeah,
we're gonna fix everything for you.
yeah. I'm going to hold your hand and take you to heaven. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
going to get you
Yeah,
there.
we're just hop on board, because
Yeah,
that's where I'm going. I'm going
yeah.
straight to heaven, and I'm going to take you with me.
It's
But
sad how dismissive we became, isn't it?
oh my gosh, Bill, it's one of those things that has taken me a long time to uh, to not feel. You know, when you're in a religion, especially the one we came from. Uh, they want you to be broken. You need to be, constantly, they got to reaffirm constantly that you're broken, and that you have to stay within these boundaries, right? Because we're going to fix you, but you're not going to be fixed until you get to the next life. That's our reward, and so they want you to be broken. They want you to feel all the shame and guilt. Well, and I did. My story anyway. There was a lot of things that I did younger that I've just had a lot of guilt about. But anyway, once you leave, right, and I get away from that, I'm trying to find my way. I'm trying to figure out whether God exists, whether Jesus Christ exists, whether any of this is true anymore. What I found is, as I start to deconstruct and think about the things we're just talking about and how I judge people, well, now you take on another set of shame and guilt, right? And you got to process that as well. And I'm getting better. I really am working hard to convince myself that I wasn't as bad as maybe I thought I was, and it wasn't my fault. It's just the way we were indoctrinated and the way we were taught and what we believed. And I'm just glad it's behind me.
I have a lot of folks who go, Bill, how could I be so stupid? Here I am, I'm 55 years old, and I just figured out that my religion is just one of a million religions, and it imposed itself as true, but it's not any more true than any other one. And my response is that you're beating yourself up because you think it took you 55 years, but the reality is that so few people wake up, that to wake up at all puts you in a pretty special group of people who were willing to confront your comfortable beliefs. You were willing to confront your tribe. You were willing to confront your system and go, like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't right. And I don't care what age you wake up at. I think that's a pretty brave act. Let's talk for a moment about Jesus.
Okay.
First off, there's the writings, the Bible, New Testament specifically. There's and of course, in our system, Mormonism, we had this extra book, but you have the scriptures, which tell a story about this man who lived at the meridian of time. And, those stories frame that man a certain way. Correct. And then you've got your particular religious system that comes in and adds all these layers of who that man is and was and how he operates. And deconstructing not just your system, but now Christianity at large, you really have to kind of go back and go, like, okay, maybe my system's wrong about him. And maybe he's the real deal. And maybe if I get rid of the lens that my system gave me, I'll figure it out. And then as you've kind of hinted at, and I want to kind of get you to talk a little bit here about this, but once you move beyond your system, now there's the larger system of Christianity where you have to go back in and go, like, are the same problems here, but under a different name? Do we run into same kinds of issues that impose that I start deconstructing another layer? And I'm just curious, because that can be really scary for folks. It's one thing to deconstruct Mormonism, but if you go the next step and start deconstructing Christianity or religion at large, which is the next layer away, people get kind of frightened not having the stability of those things anymore. Your thoughts?
They do. Well, that's exactly what happened to me, Bill, is, once I did that deep dive, and I realized that my religion, Mormonism, was not true. And from there, it just started to cascade. Well, if this isn't true, then what about God? And if God isn't real, then Jesus Christ can't be real. And of course I started looking at the Bible really, and of course, when Sandy and I left, we had we had no idea, Bill, that there was a whole world out there of post Mormon, support. We didn't know anything about these podcasts. We didn't know anything about the subreddit. We didn't know anything about anything. And so I can't tell you how much that, you and RFM and Mormon Stories and all of it has helped us to look at just the Bible, and how I've come to realize that there's just things in there that could not be true. When it comes to the flood, and it comes to the Tower of Babel, and it comes to all the other stuff. And so I've really struggled with trying to be, because I felt like I was a very spiritual person, and I still want to be, and it felt good to have that belief in God and belief that my sins had been atoned for, and I just had this. It made me feel good, right? And now all of a sudden, somebody just drops that trap door, right? Opens that door, and it's all gone. It's just gone. So what the hell do you do now? And so I'm still struggling with that, but I've come to realize that I just think that if our religion is not true, then none of them are. There is no. It's all man-made. It's just, and so again, I'm struggling with God. And was there a guy named Jesus Christ? That taught us some good principles, and possibly, but beyond that, I just, it's something
even the name there, the idea that his name is Jesus Christ, right? And the reality, right? He's this rebellious zealot within the Jewish faith, Yahshua Bar Yosef, and he probably existed, but all these layers that we've added to them, and I'm going to guess, during this 2 years of kind of deconstructing all of this, you even acknowledge here we are 2 years later, and you still can't exactly figure out how to make sense of this new worldview. But I tried several times to stop at places. Like I tried to go like, okay, here's the point where I'll hold on to these things and let go of those things, and I'll just stay here forever. And the reality is I learned that maybe it was a plateau for a moment where I could take a breather, but within another month or two, I'm now in another spot because I've done read another book. Listened to another podcast.
When we first left, we thought, okay, there's some problems, but gosh, the church teaches some good things, right? So I think, what, we can still go once in a while and just go to, the main meeting, listen to some good stuff, right? And we'll still be able to get some good out of this, because at the time we're still fully believing in God and Jesus, and we just know that there's some problems with our religion. So we went one time and sat there on the back bench, and when that meeting, that hour-long meeting was over, we just looked at each other and said, there's nothing here for us. There's nothing here.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
And we've never been back. We just realized that we can't do this. It's just impossible. And you're right. So you move on a little bit further, and you think, okay, now I don't believe in this particular God anymore, but there has to be a God. So we don't know who he is, or what he looks like, or whether he lives in on Kolob or wherever the hell he is, but he's there, right? And so I stayed there for a while. And then the further you start peeling that onion back, the more you're right, you move on somewhere else. And it's just a continuous progression. And it's when you've been doing it for 65 years, it's tough.
Yeah. There were moments where, I knew that my system's leaders weren't flawless, and I knew that they had made serious mistakes that deeply violated the way we had framed our theology and our doctrine and the historical events that make up our history. But I thought, okay, but maybe it's true in some other way. And then as you point out, I let go of that. And then I tried to find solace and find a home in some breakoff group of our faith system that was a little more liberal. So it'd be like leaving the Amish to join the Mennonites, for instance.
Right.
And I tried that. And then I said, okay, I'll try maybe some branch of Christianity that's not anything to do with my system. And I tried that. And every step along the way, I just realized it was all more myth. It was all more made up stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
And anytime you, let me say it this way. You were talking about going back to church and listening. The moment I knew my system wasn't true, I would sit in on a sacrament meeting or some other function, and these folks are saying the same things they've been saying for decades that
Yes.
I knew was the right, true message in the past. And in this moment, I couldn't help but see the holes in their logic. I couldn't help but see that teaching was going to cause trauma and harm to somebody. I couldn't help but see the manipulation that was going on. I couldn't help but sense that they were placing faith in things
Right.
that couldn't possibly be true. They were absurd, such as the flood or Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
It becomes, you're trying to be there because you want that community still. You want to not have to leave and figure it all out. But you also can't sit and listen to the absurd over and over again. It really quickly, you realize the message no longer reaches you. It's not of value to you anymore.
Yeah, it's just dead air. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just empty. It's just totally empty.
Yeah.
And that's the way I got to feeling is, in that last sacrament meeting, it was obvious to us that we just didn't belong here any further. There was nothing there for us at all. We have friends there. There's good people. We love our bishop. He was the bishop when I was with him in the bishopric, and I just love him. And they're such good people, but they're in this broken system, and you just want so badly for them to know what but they got to find their own way. They got to find their own way.
So you deconstruct the Jesus of Mormonism. Are you taking on? I mean, it sounds like you're thinking about it bigger than that, and you're going like, "Hey, now I'm starting to look at Jesus of the New Testament or Jesus of Christianity." And how much time did that? Was that a quick thing too? The moment you jump into kind of some biblical criticism, or maybe Bart Ehrman, or like what was it that had you not just discard Mormonism, but also go like, hey, this next layer of Christianity is also deeply flawed?
Well, to me, it was more just reasoning, right? That if Mormonism is made up, then every other religion out there from the beginning of time is just simply a system developed by man to control people, right? And I just, for me, Bill, it was, if this isn't true, then none of it is. I can't let myself. I've been talking with someone on that I met on the internet, that left Mormonism, and now she's getting baptized in another church, and she wanted to know how I felt about that. And I just can't for the life of me understand, for me personally, how I could go from one religion to another. You know, it just
Yeah.
was so foreign right now. So when it comes to Jesus, that's one of the things that I'm trying to cling to, Bill. I'm still trying, because he's been such a big part of our lives for 65 years, and he's central to our salvation. He died for us. He took on all our sins, but did he?
Right.
That's I I'm still trying to walk down that path, and still trying to deconstruct that a bit. But
I think there's room there to hold on to him. Only so I've discarded all of that. When I read books like Sapiens by Yuval Harari, where he clearly shared with me in that book how we went from 13.2 billion years ago to becoming some sort of sentient life on the earth, and where myth comes in, and how myth is useful for binding a community together and getting them to collaborate with each other, and recognizing how bigger tribes would survive over smaller tribes, all of that. But when I discarded Mormonism, it was a really unhealthy way to see Jesus. Once I let that go, I went back and read the New Testament, setting my Mormon lens completely off to the side. And what I found was that while I didn't believe it, I don't believe the story. Again, more power to those who do.
sure,
I'm not here to say it's true or not true, only that my brain told me I couldn't arrive at a different conclusion than the one I arrived at, which is that it's just myth. But the Jesus of the New Testament seems pretty admirable.
exactly.
He seems to be standing up for the right people. He seems to be inclusive. He seems to really only be pushing back against the leaders of his religious system. And he seems to be suggesting pretty much to everyone else, like, hey, life is hard, be kind to each other, and do your best to be present, and to make choices that don't add trauma to other people, right? So
Exactly.
if I focused on the New Testament, I could maintain a Jesus that was at least not a shitty person. And but what I found was I still couldn't believe the stories. And so do I hold this guy up, or do I start valuing voices that are in my day and age that are also speaking truth, like Eckhart Tolle or Brene Brown or Sam Harris? And what I found was, if I limited myself to thinking Jesus was the echelon of wisdom, then I was going to miss out on a whole life full of learning, because there were wisdom voices that were saying as much or more truth all around me. And that
Right.
and so I let go of Jesus, the mythical figure in the stories about him that just I couldn't buy into. And I saw him as just one more teacher among 1,000 teachers who could help me to be a better human today.
Correct. And that's kind of where I'm at. I just, I'm at a point where, yeah, he may have existed, and there's a lot of things we can learn from what he did, and his beliefs, and what he taught. One thing I do know is that if there was a man named Jesus Christ back then, he would not be happy with the way our system, our religious system, treats people.
No.
He would not be okay with that.
Isn't it weird how that system tricked you into thinking he stood for a set of things, but the actual New Testament, when read without your Mormon lens, had a very different Jesus?
Exactly.
It seems strange to me that I went through several decades of life not catching on to that discrepancy.
Exactly. Well, think about all the things that we didn't catch.
Yeah.
That's just one of them. But that's been one of the things that I have been really focused on is if there was a Jesus Christ, if there was a Christ, and he would not be happy. He would not. Um, you can't reconcile the two. You just can't. You can't reconcile, as you said, the Jesus of the New Testament and the way the Mormon Church portrays uh, Jesus today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
completely.
can't do it.
So how are you navigating spirituality today? Like what are you doing to feel happy, to feel connected to the world around you, to feel like you have access to resources and tools that help you to grow and become a better person? What does that look like today for you?
Well, obviously, um, when I look at spirituality today, and for me, it's becoming a better person, and
Yeah.
I've had to work on that from several levels. One, and one of the most important, was becoming a better husband. And trying to get that really deep indoctrination of how the man of the patriarch um, treats his wife and his children. And so I'm working very hard with that. And my wife and I have come a long ways. We've been married a long time, and it's not we've had a good marriage. We've had a very good marriage. We've had some rough times, but becoming a better husband and becoming a better father and establishing these relationships with my children, trying to look at people differently, just being a good person. And I'm a
Yeah.
much better person. My wife will tell you this. In the last 2 years, I've become a better person.
Yeah.
I'm much more pleasant for people to be around. And not that I was an asshole or anything, but anyway, that's to me
Totally.
spirituality now is just be this not being judgmental, accepting people for who they are. Again, becoming a better father, better husband, working harder to just make the world better, and realizing that there are differences of opinion. One of the things we talked about earlier, some of my beliefs, when things as simple as global warming, right? Well, that's not simple, but when you're all in this system that we were in, there's no such, God's not going to allow us to destroy his earth, right? This is all a myth. All this global warming stuff is a myth. Well, now I realize that there's something there, and I've got to do my part to make the world a better place. I have to realize that
Yeah.
we are doing things to the planet that I can change and do things differently. It's not all black and white anymore for me. So when you start thinking of spirituality, especially when you take God out of it, because I pretty much have, I no longer, get down on my knees at night and pray. We no longer, because I wouldn't know who to pray to. Uh, so,
Yeah.
and that was a big part of our lives, as you know, Bill. That connection that we have to God through prayer and just meditation, and that's all gone now. If I were to get out on my knees and pray, I wouldn't know who the hell I'd pray to. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
so spirituality to me, I don't know what it is anymore. I really don't. I don't. Uh, And again, you come out of this system after 65 years and you're so, you just know you're right, and then all of a sudden it comes crashing down. So I don't know what that means anymore, Bill. I don't know what
Well,
spirituality
yeah,
means.
I think you hit it on the head, and I totally relate to you. Like being lost in, even when I hear people today discussing it, like I have my own definition for what spirituality is. It was the things you kind of hit on, which is, learning and growing, trying to be a better you, and doing things. And again, by being my best version of myself, by trying to be present in a given moment or interaction with a person, and trying to really be in that moment. The best way I can explain it is to try to come up with, every move I make is to try to create the best outcome possible for everyone around me. Like, how can I
Correct.
reduce the trauma in this room? And how can I help everybody here feel valued, acceptable, feel like they have a voice, feel like they belong? And when I act in the world in ways that seek to do that, by really paying attention to this moment right here, and having a conversation with my friends or with strangers where I give them space to feel loved and accepted in the universe, that feels spiritual to me. But
Sure.
I don't know exactly how to name it, and I don't exactly know how to define it. And when I hear other people away from me using the word spirituality, I'm not exactly sure we're talking about the same thing anymore.
Right.
Inside a system, we have all these labels and definitions, and so we're pretty sure we're all talking the same language. And when you deconstruct that and you realize every human being is completely different, like inside your head, the way you frame the world is alien to the way I frame the world and the way I see the world around me. We may have similar experiences. We may have similar beliefs. We may use similar language, but the experience really is completely different than the person next to you. There's this effort decades ago to just make the assumption that, hey, this is what it means to arrive, to have, achieved whatever it is in this life that needs to be achieved. Now we all just need to look the same and do this thing and be on this path. And today you look around it and everyone is so different, and I'm good with that. I want it to be that way. But then you realize there isn't any set of rules. There isn't a way to create a box that everyone who's good will fit in. It doesn't work that way. So you have to start allowing people to have their own individual story. So that's also going to apply to the word spirituality. It's going to be different for every single person. I relate to it in the ways that you named. And I'm also not sure you and I are having the same conversation around the same word.
Right.
It no longer is simple.
Exactly. It's not. And again, once you take, God out of it, it just takes on a whole new meaning, and it can mean something different for every person.
Yeah.
How
maybe
they
it should.
get to that. And
And maybe it
exactly.
should.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can any longer say, well, this is how you define spirituality. This is how you become spiritual without God. It's like you said, I think it's different for everybody. And for me, it's just trying to make the best of the last 20 years that I spent 65 years this way. And now I've got to reset, literally reset, and try to figure out how I'm going to live the next 20 years of my life and be productive, be, there a lot of things changed for me when we left, because you're in this mindset, of course, Bill, that Christ is coming any day now, right? And so you got to be prepared for that. And so you spend your every waking moment worrying about, am I going to make it? Right? Yeah. Am I spiritual enough? What about my kids? What about, am I up to date on all my tithes, and everything? And that's what you spend your whole life doing.
Checklist.
It's trying to do that checklist.
Yeah.
And then when you fall down somewhere, now you've got to spend what time it takes and effort to try to make that correction, try to
Yeah.
get forgiven, right? And so it's just this uh, crappy way to live. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
Once you get out of it, you realize just how shitty it was.
Yeah.
And so now I've got 20 years left to try to figure out how to make sure that I've fixed everything I can fix with my kids, with my
Yeah.
wife, with my family,
Yeah.
with, and me and my kids are good. We're doing good. They, um, you know, we can talk about things now that would have been completely taboo,
Yeah.
you
Off
know,
limits.
and totally off limits. When we're having a blast when we get together, we can share a beer, and it's just it's great. But that's the tough part.
There's less hierarchies, right? Like you're inside the system. Not only are you their dad, but you kind of preside over your children, right? And
Mhm.
you're kind of the boss. You're the patriarch of your family, and there's all
Correct.
this language that creates distance because now you're up here and they're down here, and their job is to take in your wisdom and your counsel and your advice, and so there's this distance between you because they should be there's something about you that puts you in a higher position of authority than them. And when I
Correct.
deconstructed all that, like, yes, half my chromosomes went into making them, but they are their own individual human of the same
Right.
worth and value as me. And we used to say that in the system, but we didn't quite understand what that meant. They are literally not just equal to me. If we understand, um, if we understand it well enough, they are me. Like they're human. Yes, like I'm human, but also that's a label too. Life came out of the universe, and here we are today, but 13.2 billion years ago it was something else. And so for me to now look across at any other person in my wife, my children, my friends, or a complete stranger, I now realize, like, oh, their life really is of equal value to mine. Their life
Right.
experience is also of the same value as my life experience. Everybody should be considered and listened to and heard. Not that what everyone says is right or wrong or true. There are still going to be things people say or do that I'm not going to incorporate in my life. But I don't get to dismiss them simply because they're not me.
Correct.
People does, people, if I sit down with my daughter and she's telling me about her life situation, she's 20, 22 years old, 21 years old. And I'm 43. And so sometimes I just think like, oh, like, you don't know anything, kid. Let me tell you what I think. I don't do that anymore. Like, I'm sitting down with my
Right.
daughter last night, who came from California. Most of our relationship has been pretty tenuous because I treated her the way that we treat people inside that system when we're the
Right.
we're the ones that are in charge, right? And now I'm
Correct.
having a conversation with her last night, and I'm like, you got to move back here. I really just want to get to know you. Like, I was so emotionally unavailable on the first half of life that
Yes.
I never took the time to get to know you. And I just want to tell you, I really like you. Like, I've spent the last couple of days talking to you, and I really like you. And I really hope that you do move back here. I'd really like to get to know you and do this differently. And as you're pointing out, like, I'm closer to my kids, I'm closer to my wife. I'm trying to resolve the things that went wrong, the places where I didn't act healthy.
Yep.
Good for you, because um, they're not just your kids. They're another life form on this planet having their own experience, and it really is of the same value as your life form having your experience.
Exactly. Yes. And yeah, that's been a tough one for me, Bill. Is when I think back with some of the issues that came up with
Yeah,
my kids and the way
yeah,
that I responded to those issues. Um,
yeah,
some of the things I said uh, and felt, and the judgment, all of it.
Yeah.
And it was all formed and a result of what I was taught, and how important it was for them to get in line, right? And so I just didn't take the time to understand what they were going through. I
Yeah.
didn't take the time to have that conversation, because it's just black and white. You have to be on this side of the line. If you go
Yeah.
over here, then we got nothing to talk about. And my I didn't have a father, but I had a stepfather, and that's a whole nother story. But my mom was the same way. She I love my mother. She died about 30 years ago, but I loved her. I did. But there was never any kind of I mean, again, you either get in line and live the gospel, and if you don't, then we got nothing to talk about. There's
Right.
no conversation to be had. Why are you experiencing what you're doing? Why do you feel the way you do? How can we help you? It's just flat, this is the
And
way it's
because
got
you're
to be.
living the life you're living, you think it's simple that everyone else should be able to just get on the path and do life the way you're doing it, right? Like,
Exactly, because I know
and you,
better.
yeah, and you don't even comprehend, even as like you're older than your kids by 20 years or more, right? 20 to
Yeah,
35 years or so. Um, you can't even comprehend in that naive stage of life where you're sure your system's right and has the correct path, and suddenly your kids aren't living that out in its fullest expression, and you decide, like, I know you could do better, I know you could be doing these other things. And the
right.
reality is, even at 40 years old, I was ignorant to how different another human being is doing life inside their own head.
Exactly.
All these judgments were so unfair. I,
Oh,
I I would tell my kids, like, there's no reason why you can't get in line and do what I'm asking you to do. It's going to get you back to Heavenly Father. And the reality is, I couldn't even comprehend how their life experience has affected them and why they're making
exactly.
the decisions they're making.
Exactly. And it's not just that, Bill. It's you have this plan, right? That we're taught, and then all of a sudden for me, you got three sons, right? And they one by one are choosing not to go on their missions, right? And they're
Yeah.
choosing not to do
Yeah.
these things, that you have this all worked out. And what it comes down to, it's not so much that uh, that they should be going because it's what's right. It's that's that shows the organization, that shows the ward, the people that you go to church with, that that you're doing what needs to be done, that your kids are in
Yeah.
line, that and when you don't have that, you're not thinking about the kid as much as you are the shame that you feel, because your kids aren't the same as this family.
Yeah.
This family's got 10 boys and they've all gone on missions. You got
Yeah.
three, you can't even get one. So what the hell did I do wrong?
Yeah.
You know?
You know you're a good Mormon when you raise more good Mormons.
Exactly.
And you signal
Exactly.
to your ward around you that you're a good Mormon by raising more good Mormons. And
Correct.
if you have 4 kids and 2, 3, 4 end up off the gospel path, then
Yep.
it becomes clear you're signaling to everyone else that you didn't do it well enough. You
You
didn't do it
didn't
right.
do it well enough. You just
No.
didn't. We're not sure what you did wrong,
Right.
and
But you
and
did
and
do
that's
something
the
wrong.
guilt. That's the guilt you carry with you, because
Yeah.
Sandy and I both, but we've always felt that. We didn't have our home evening. We didn't read the scriptures enough. We didn't pray. Now, all those things are what you carry with you for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It
rough.
teaches you to objectify your wife or your children. It teaches you to treat those around you as the objects and the signals of whether you're being righteous enough or not. So it was almost like I was so messed up inside by everything not going the perfectly that I then manipulated and put tons of pressure on my wife and children to be what would look like the signal of being a good Mormon would look like. And
Right.
it ended up with me causing lots of trauma on my wife and children by always letting them know I was disappointed in them when they weren't doing what I would do, and saying things and treating them in ways that depreciated them and didn't value them as an individual human being. And I think religious systems are doing that all the time. As you point out, when we get past it, it just feels like the burden is either not there or so much lighter. It is noticeable.
It's so noticeable.
Yeah.
It just is. And then again, of course, you got different burdens because that burden's gone, but then the burden of trying to fix everything the best you can and build up those relationships and I've got awesome kids. I've got four awesome kids, and you realize just how awesome they are. Once you take those blinders off. Once that system has been broken down and it's gone, and you can talk the way you should be able to talk to your kids and get to know them, and your wife too, and our grandkids, and everything's different. But the burden is light, much lighter.
No, I can relate to that. Everything is different, and most of it for the better. Almost entirely. Not that everything is perfect, not that everything goes perfect. There's still, we're still human, so we still have unhealthy parts of our ego that show up at moments, but almost entirely it's better.
Yeah, everything's better. We have a better relationship with, as we've said, financially we're doing better. I'm no longer giving
a significant portion of your money away.
Significant.
The
last 45, every time I think about it, how much that I gave and didn't save. Right. Where I didn't prepare. But anyway, that part has changed. I mean, we're doing so much better financially, how could that be? Right. How could that possibly be? But financially, and just personally, everything, my relationships with almost everybody I deal with is different,
It's
and
more authentic.
Even people I work with, that have known me to be this certain person. Now all of a sudden I'm different. Now all of a sudden we'll be at dinner, and I'll have a beer with dinner, and they'll look at me like, what's different now? Right. And so, I've had to go through that with a lot of people. And so work relationships have changed for the better, because I'm telling you, people, when you're inside a system like that, people react to you differently than they would normally.
You're less approachable. You're less. You don't really.
They can't be authentic. They can't be themselves. Because they're afraid they
Everybody's
might
pretending.
offend you. Everybody's pretending. Exactly. We've got some good friends that we ride motorcycles with, and we'd go on trips with them. And of course, they knew who we were and what we believed. And we'd go out to dinner, and they drink, but they wouldn't drink in front of us. They wouldn't drink at dinner. And we never asked them not to, or we wouldn't have cared one way or the other. And of course, then after we left, they had to admit that they held back. They couldn't be themselves. They were afraid that they would offend us if they had a glass of wine with dinner. So it's not only you're not authentic, but everybody around you has to act a little bit differently, and that's changed, for the better. I think you're muted, Bill.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I was just saying that your outward processes are changed, your inward processes are changed. You don't feel the pressure to fit in. So not only do you get to be a more authentic version of yourself, but it feels safe to allow other people to be their authentic version of themselves. And it just seems like a way to be a lot less stressed out about the world, which I think
Exactly.
adds to other things, right? You get to be more present. In a high demand fundamentalist religion, you're constantly worried about past and future, what you're going to achieve to get to heaven, what you've done in
Right.
the past that you need to repent of. And the reality is, like, let me just be right here, right now, and be the best version of myself in this moment. And when you talked about spirituality earlier, not only are you trying to be the best version of yourself, and letting other people be the best version of themselves as well, but I think it really does help you to be more present, to be more in the moment, knowing like, hey, I don't know what comes after this life. I don't know how this world's going to end. I don't know how my life's going to end, but I have this moment and let me make the most of it. And I
Yeah.
think it becomes much easier to be present after you deconstruct things.
Absolutely. And like you said, we don't know what's coming. I used to think I did. And because I thought I did, uh, it was something that scared me. I was
Yeah.
scared of what
Yeah.
was next. I was afraid of death. I was afraid to, but I'm not anymore. I don't even think about it. I don't
Yeah.
think about if there's something after this life, great. If there's not, we won't even know about it. So
Right.
I
Right.
don't think about those things at all anymore. It's not a worry to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that is when you talk about burdens being lifted, that's a huge burden that's
Yeah.
been lifted.
I want to talk about one more thing, and that's community, friends. And so in the system gives you an extended family. Every
Correct.
Sunday you show up, and these people, at least on the surface, seem to care about you. You care about them. You get to chance to ask about each other's lives. You get to serve next to each other. There really is that social bonding, that social community facet that I shouldn't say every, but most humans need and crave. It kind of gets supplied to you. And then when you deconstruct religion, oftentimes you lose that community.
You
Your
do.
old friends don't really, they really valued you based on you fitting in. And the moment you don't fit in, um, you don't have the same value to them. Again, it's not that someone's being mean or unhealthy. It's that's what we're trained to do. We're trained by the system
Exactly.
to value those who fit in the box. At Especially at an older age, I got to imagine it's really difficult to lose your tribe, and at least from in the beginning, not have another community to go to. Any thoughts
It,
there?
it is. And, you know, that, that, that one day, right? Every Sunday,
Yeah.
that is, that's something that, especially when you lived as long as we have, that's an extremely uh, important part of your life is
Yeah.
to that community that you have.
Yeah.
Most of the people in our ward here are much younger than us, so we've got a few friends here, but finding someone our age that is been through similar, circumstances is not easy. And
Right.
we spend a lot of time together, my wife and I, and we do have a couple of friends, but trying to replace that is, it's tough. you know, and I reach out on Facebook, and, you know, I did I posted in I think it was in the Facebook group, the Mormon Stories podcast group. And I asked questions about, you know, if there's any other seniors out there that are experiencing some of the things that we are. And I posted several questions out there. Oh my gosh, the response to that was just huge. I didn't realize, you know, and those are some of the things that people would message. A lot of people messaged me off, you know, a personal message, and uh, um, they're struggling with that, Bill. How do I replace this? I'm lonely. We don't have, some of these are single sisters, you know, single women that have left the church, and they got nobody left. They got, how do you rebuild that? You know, and so that's what I kind of want to work towards, is try to build up a community of where people our age can get some support, because there just isn't a lot out there, Bill, for people our age. When I look at these forums and the subreddits and the Facebook groups and all these podcasters, this whole Exmo community, it's all young people. It's not the seniors. And I'm telling you, we talked about this earlier, Bill. It is really difficult for people our age, some, to leave if they want to leave. They just can't do it. There's, you know, you've got these, you know, people our age, and because so many young people are leaving, there's nobody to do all the calling. So who do they get to do it? You know, the pressure on senior members to stay active, to accept the callings, to work at the temple, to go on missions. It's just tremendous. And they, and that, and the fact that, like we talked earlier, if they've got kids that are still active, they'll lose access to their grandkids, you know? And so it's really difficult to find that community. And we're pretty lucky. We've got some friends that we ride motorcycles with that I met through, I don't know if you've ever heard of the organization called the Temple Riders. It's a Mormon motorcycle group. And I used to run the chapter for Colorado. And so I met some people through that organization, through the Temple Riders. It's just a group of Mormons that ride around, go to temples on their motorcycles. And so, and most of them are still members of the church, but they don't attend church. They're what we, I guess, could call Jack Mormons, right? They still believe, but they don't attend. They don't live it. And so but they're much younger than us. So we're trying to find that community. We're trying to find that group that we can, you know, try to replace that community with. So
it's been easier for me only because I live in southern Utah, and the system I left, I mean, half the population here or more either is in it or has left it.
Right.
And you know, there's just not as many people here in this community that have never been associated with the system I came from. So it's easy to meet people who have these shared trauma experiences and shared meaning in their lives, and who have all gone through this hard thing of deconstructing it. And so there's this giant pool of people that I immediately can bond with easily. Whereas, you know, you being in Colorado, and can I ask, whereabouts in Colorado are you?
We live on the western slope. We're in Montrose, Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for anybody that lives out in that direction, if you're, you know, looking to connect with somebody, reach out to us and I'll put you in contact with Mike, and maybe there's a way to build a community there, but it has to be so much harder in places where here you came from the system and there aren't as many people around who also came from that system and have deconstructed it. Right. And so you kind of have to build relationships kind of you know, the way the world does. So you go to events and you try to meet people and you go to dinner and you try to find things in common, but it probably is more difficult to find people that you connect with and to build really strong, lasting friendships.
Yeah, it is, but
Yeah.
it'll come. It'll come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally see that as well. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, Mike, and this is a hard thing to get at. There's so much that has to be reevaluated, taken apart, examined to see if it's useful outside of the myth. And
Right.
then, to incorporate new things, discard old things, and readapt the ones you're going to hang on to. And it makes for a fun life. I really enjoy learning I think more than I did before, although I've always liked to learn.
Oh, yeah.
But I love competing voices. I love disagreement.
Yes.
I love to hear the other side of the story when I'm confident I'm on the right side of an issue. I still want
Correct.
to give the other side a fair shake, and often find myself changing my mind
Absolutely.
easily if somebody comes forward with new information that is a game changer.
Absolutely.
Whereas in
Absolutely.
a past life, I would have just discarded it and dismissed it and hung on to my
Well,
comfortable beliefs.
that's how we got out of our system.
Yeah.
Somebody presented something to us that was a different view,
Competing thought. Yeah.
or a competing thought, and said, "Look, here's some evidence that you haven't looked at." Right? And so you
Yeah.
got to look at the evidence. You have to give both sides that opportunity. And again, politically, that's what I'm trying to do is try to find that sweet spot, and not. I don't think you have to give up. I don't have to give up all my conservative views.
No, some of those have value still. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I'm going to hang on to those. But yeah, it's a struggle, and and I don't want to be. I mean, I just think it's more difficult for people my age, because we've got so little time left, and we're just further along. And somebody in their 40s like you, I think it's just easier to navigate it. I think it's easier to navigate it.
At least for me, it has been. Again, location's been a big deal. Age group has been a big deal. I think if I would have done this as a teenager, it would have been hard to find maybe friends.
Right.
Doing it as an older adult, I think, has its difficulty. But I also agree that kind of that 35 to 45 range in this faith system, deconstructing it seems to be a nice sweet spot to meet new people and to build new relationships and connections.
Exactly. And not only that, you've a lot of people in that age group, their children are still fairly young.
Yeah.
So they're able to try to get them on a different path, right? And so I just think the world's a better place without the system. No question.
Yeah. I guess kind of wrapping up, we talked about kind of reformulating spirituality. You talked about what spirituality looks like. What do you do now to fill your day? So all the time that you used to spend thinking about and doing things in order to be what you were supposed to be inside that system, what do you fill your life with today that is different? How do you what's a different day? Let me say it differently. What are you doing today that looks different than what you did 5 years ago, but which you find a lot of value? Like what's a life well lived?
Well, obviously, I'm still working, and so and I travel quite a bit. But when I travel, I'm trying to read and listen to things that can help me navigate my newfound, beliefs and philosophies.
Yeah.
Right.
What's an example? What's a favorite thing that you really have been digging?
Well,
doing?
I've gone back and pulled almost everything that you and RFM have done. So I download that and I listen to you guys a lot. I've been listening to. I got what's the guy's name? Sam Smith? Is it Sam? Oh gosh, I just run across him the other day.
The only thing I can think of is Sam Harris.
Sam Harris.
Yeah,
Right.
the Making Sense podcast, I think, and he's
I've been listening to some of his stuff, and I listened to one the other day about free will, which I thought was just fascinating. So I'm just trying to expand, my, like I said before, it was just all either, I was either, I'd get on a plane and I'd read scriptures, I would listen to conference talks, and now not, I'm just trying to get all different points of view, and just trying to again figure out how to be a better person, how to do things better.
And I think you've got a whole lifetime ahead of you, whatever that lifetime is, and you said
Correct.
20 more years. It's whatever it is, and like you, I just want to spend every day improving at how I treat others and taking in as much information, because I realize there's a correlation between those two things. The more I learn today, the more tools I'll have in my tool bag tomorrow, and I'll have a better chance of being a version of myself that doesn't cause harm or trauma in the world, and also enjoys my life experience. And so learning has value to my actual lived experience. I just want to say, Mike, I appreciate this conversation. At times, I think we were kind of stammering through it because it's really hard to put language to some of this and to say it in a way that the listener goes like, oh, I can connect with that. I'm going through that too. And in some places we probably were too general, and maybe these are all topics we could just dig into for an hour and a half each one. But it means a lot to me that people sit down and are willing to share their life experience and hope that others get value from it. I think deconstructing religion is painful and difficult. I think that deconstructing religion is an important step for people who have woken up and kind of, gotten out of those things and found better ways to show up in the world. But any last thoughts from you? And we'll kind of close this out. And if folks have any questions or thoughts, they can put a comment on the episodes, or they can email us at Mormon Discussions Podcast with an S on the end at gmail.com. And I'll make sure that Mike's aware of any feedback that comes in. But any final thoughts from you, and we'll kind of close it out there.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Bill. I do. It's been fun, and these are things I like to talk about, and I have been looking for a way to be a little more vocal, and I used to spend a lot of my time thinking about how to get people into the system, right? You spend your whole life trying to figure out how to get people into your system, get them to come with you on this journey to the afterlife, and so now I've had to switch, and it's not that I want to work at getting people out. I just want to be able to maybe help people that have gotten out, especially my age. People have to figure out their own way. But no, I just appreciate the opportunity, and it's been fun, Bill.
Good. Have a great day, my friend. And folks, if you're enjoying the Almost Awakened podcast, you can also visit us on our website, almostawakened.org. There's tons of resources and stuff on that site as well. Also, you can join our Reddit forum. We have a Reddit forum, Almost Awakened. And I try to post, new insightful articles on sexuality, psychedelics, shadow work, which is kind of working on yourself and confronting your own unhealthy mechanisms that come out of your ego, and really trying to give people those resources and tools, Mike, that help people to form their best life after religion. And folks, if you're enjoying these conversations, if you can, we'd love to. If you send a few bucks, you can go to the website and just click the donate button. But regardless, like, share the podcast, and if it's meeting a need for you and helping you to get more out of your life, then I'm just truly grateful to be part of sharing information and stories that help people to process things and to show up better the next day. And Mike, thanks so much for sharing your journey today and talking about all that goes into wrestling with our beliefs and wrestling with systems.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, take it easy.
All right, see you.
Bye-bye.
This has been another Almost Awakened episode. Check us out at almostawakened.org, where you can check out past episodes, make a donation to keep this podcast running, email us a question or comment, or find out more about the resources shared in today's episode. For coaching opportunities or extra support, visit NoNonsenseSpirituality.com to meet with Certified Spiritual Director Brittany Hartley.